Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. As you guys can see, we're in the shop today, and something that we have been talking about for many weeks has finally showed up. And what that is, well, let's just go ahead and cut to that. And as you just saw, we had a wire harness, a couple boxes from Haltech, and a couple adapters. And what that is going to do is allow us to fill this hole over here on the passenger side fender. And what that is the new plug and play kit from Haltech and tuned by Sean. And it is his kit that we're going to be putting into the Corvette. So as you guys can see, we've got a Haltech box here, we got a Haltech box here. This is a wideband one single channel wideband controller. This is a Haltech Nexus R3. You guys can see that there. And what this is basically, it's basically a slightly better option to Rebel LS. I'll be honest, guys. When you look at the specs between the Rebel LS and this, there's not much computing difference with the ECU. I think it has a little bit more bells and whistles because it is their R series versus the LS. It is a little bit more expensive, so it has a little bit more options, but also it doesn't come with a wire harness. The Rebel LS, as we showed in previous videos, does come with a wire harness, and that basically is to replace factory wire harness with an aftermarket. This kit right here is designed around the R3, but it's also designed to go ahead and plug into your factory wire harness on your E38 equipped ECU. So this kit is going to be basically an adapter harness going from the factory Chevrolet engine harness to the Haltech R3. So that's why you got the Chevrolet connectors down here. You got the Haltech connectors right here. And this is basically going to allow us to go ahead, get full chassis integration with everything from Chevrolet, working with the aftermarket ECU from Haltech. And the two things that's going to basically allow us to do that is, one is this CAN bus controller from Minton Performance. It's basically an interpreter, kind of like we've said in the past. It's going to interpret the CAN bus from the Chevrolet and then basically pass that signal to the Haltech. And then connecting from the Corvette harness to the Haltech ECU is this harness from Boomslang. I wasn't aware these were available until I just happened to stumble upon it. And this is basically what is allowing us to use Tuned by Sean's kit to go ahead and connect the Haltech R3 to the Corvette. So you guys can see we have a 3D printed bracket here. This is from Tuned by Sean. And I will point one thing out. I've already called Sean about this. Actually, I emailed him. You guys will see that the 3D printed bracket is broken. Yes, that did break in shipping. I've already talked to Sean about this. Like I said, I sent him an email. He called me within like 8 hours of me sending that email. So we already have a new one coming. I think it should be here within like Monday. Today's Saturday, so I think it'll be here Monday or Tuesday. So yeah, we won't be able to go ahead and do the permanent install, but that's fine. We're still mocking things up anyway. And so it's not any sweat off my back. But the only advice I really gave Sean was like, hey, this is a 3D printed part. It is kind of fragile. I would just make sure you wrap that in bubble wrap. That way, if it does get stuck under something, it doesn't break it. Because I think what happened with mine, the ECU, the wire harness, the wideband kit was all sitting on top of this. And in shipping, that, you know, the combination probably just got flipped upside down one too many times. And when it landed, it probably hit the converter box, and that's what broke the 3D printed mount. So yeah, let's go ahead, get the wideband open up. Let's get the ECU opened up, and we'll show you kind of what we'll be working with. So I think the way the wideband controller works is it basically allows you to, they have a WB1 kit and a WB2. I believe the wideband 2 kit allows you to have 2 wideband sensors, and then it's just one plug, you know, up to the ECU. I believe the way Boomslang and Haltech did it with the Rebel LS is they basically used up some of the wires and the inputs on the Haltech ECU, and they ran, you know, a dedicated wideband for that. And then when you go ahead and buy this WB1 kit, that basically allows you to add a second wideband. And this is yet again a 6-pin adapter. I actually don't have the wideband, the secondary wideband. Sean mentioned that that was on back order. I actually do have that kit. It came with the Rebel LS, so we may kind of go rob some parts from that Rebel LS kit, and then whenever we're ready and done with the Rebel LS, I can include the kit that Sean owes me with that and sell that off. So now for the Nexus R3, it's pretty much going to be boxed up identical to the Rebel LS. You open it up. Here's your ECU. It looks exactly like the Rebel LS. It's got your battery terminals up top. You got your mount holes right there. So there's 4 of those. On the bottom, there's just 3 harnesses. Like I said, exactly like the Rebel LS. And then you've got your wideband onboard sensor. You've got your 3 sensors like I was telling you. Oh, and then here on the bottom, you got the USB cable as well as the radio antenna for the built-in Wi-Fi. So that's pretty much the ECU. Nothing new there. And then in this box, it's just the mounting hardware as well as that antenna we're talking about and the battery terminals itself. Now, speaking of power and ground for the ECU, Sean does sell a pre-made battery cable kit. I think it's like $150. Now, I did not go that route. I just bought some copper wire off Amazon. It should be here, I think, on Monday or Tuesday. And basically what we'll be doing that is crimping our own lines. Sean gives you the exact measurement you need. I think I bought 10 feet. You need like 6 feet, so I'll have a little bit extra cable. So that's pretty much the ECU. Here's one of the battery terminals that we were just telling you about. So you take off this plastic piece, you put this metal piece inside of your crimper. You're basically going to crush that terminal into that plastic housing. And just to give you a little more information, that is 4 AWG battery terminal. The Aussies have a different metric scale for that. I'll be honest, I forgot what the battery cable size is, but it does basically translate to the American size of 4 AWG. All right, guys, I just had my first question answered, and that was, which way do these ECU wires run? Do they go through here, this square, or do they run underneath and up and back? And that's exactly how they're supposed to be ran. I initially had them ran through here, you know, when I put this ECU harness in, I don't know, 2 months ago, something like that. But the way this plug and play kit from Sean is going to be working is you basically need to stick this 3D printed piece in here, go back behind the here, and you guys will see that mount. Now I'm going to have to fish this in through there, but you guys get the picture. Basically, there is going to be a mount there, and that will allow us to go ahead and mount the bracket, and then the bracket will allow us to mount the ECU. Well, with everything with hot rodding, I had to modify the part a bit. I don't know if the 2006 newer inner fender liners are different than the 2005s. Again, we've ran into multiple issues with this swap and everything else that we've done here in the past, but basically Sean's mount was too wide for my fender. And so you guys can see we basically cut off the end on both sides. It probably took about a 1/4 inch off both ends, and this should fit in here without any major issue now. But like I said, I can't say this is an issue for Sean's kit as a whole, but this could be, again, just a weird 2005 thing. Only we shall see. But as far as I know, you know, no one else has documented this swap with the plug and play kit. So modified this mount a little bit. So I basically took the mount, and you guys can see our mark there, our mark there. I basically marked it where it was going to be inside this flange right here on both sides. And that's what was preventing this from sitting flush inside the fender mount. So, and the other thing is there is a short top and a longer bottom. That's going to basically, you want the shorter piece to go at the top here and the longer piece to go in the bottom here. So, all right, now that looks how it's supposed to mount. And so like I said, cutting off the edge of that flange allowed us to get this to sit flush. So we have the mount placed in the back there, and you guys will see I used a little bit of super glue from Harbor Freight to go ahead and basically try to bond this. I'll be honest, guys, it doesn't need to be a permanent bond. I just need it to stay in place long enough to where I can get this plate on there and then get that tightened down, and maybe we can go ahead and get this glue and everything tightened down even more. I thought about using some epoxy, but honestly, that guys, it takes way too long for that, and it's real messy. I'm trying to glue something behind a fender, and I'm like, well, super glue, it might work. If not, it doesn't really matter. I just need this to stay still long enough to where we can get this plate on there, hopefully tighten that down and have it be good. All right, we got the mount on here. You guys can see that it's been fully mounted. All of the hardware's back in here. And we basically just tighten that down to where if there is any glue trying to dry, that should be compressed and should be pretty solid going forward. So like I said, we're not relying on that glue to mount the ECU, obviously. We're just using that back piece to go ahead and get it to stick to the inner fender liner here and, you know, allow us to tighten this down. And it worked. It did its job perfectly fine. So now we're able to go ahead, get this plate on here, we'll get the ECU on here, and continue the mock-up. All right, we got the ECU mounted. Like you guys can see, it says Nexus R3. We can go ahead, run our adapter cables from boom slang up to here. And that will pretty much finish out today's mock-up. Like I said, we're obviously missing the non-damaged mount. And then the other thing is, I wanted to use today to kind of figure out what we'll be doing for our boom slang harness. And what I mean by that is we might be taking off these two 30-pin connectors and modifying them a little bit. I'll include a picture here from Late Model Performance. Those guys were doing a Holley aftermarket ECU for a port injection system on one of their LT4, LT5 cars. And guys, you know, just with a little bit of work, you guys can make any harness look as good as theirs. I'm not going to say it is as good as using aftermarket wiring and all that, but you can do things to clean these things up and just look really good. Obviously, being under the fender, you're never going to see this, but you know, sometimes it's the little things that you want to take pride in. I think just taking a couple ideas of what they did, because I've done some research and I kind of found out pretty much what they did. And you can go ahead and make these kits look a lot nicer. That's basically what I'm trying to say. So, and as Sean described, everything has been plug and play. I went ahead and moved all of the, you know, these are the Haltech wiring, moved that out of the way. The adapter harness plugged right into the E38, you know, dry sump wire harness. You guys can see the tank behind us. Yeah, those things plugged in, went in without any issue. The only thing we might have to do is find a mount for, this is going to be related to the T56 TR60 reverse lockout. Basically, the updates I saw from Sean was they needed to figure out how to engage and disengage the reverse lockout. So that's why some of the boom slang wire harness is modified here with this additional relay. And then these other three wires, one of these will go to the CAN bus adapter, basically the part that goes right here, like we showed you, that is damaged, you know, so that'll go there. And then these other two, one is Lambda and one is the DTM4M. And I believe both of those will go over to the wideband box adapter. All right, guys, it's time to make positive and ground cables for our Haltech ECU. And you guys can see we have some red cable here. Yes, I probably should have bought black as well, but honestly, no one's literally ever going to see this besides you guys on this video. So we'll just put cover on both of them. And we'll just have the red terminal and black terminal. So yeah, these are the two terminals that come with the Haltech. You just unscrew them. It reveals this crush sleeve that we're going to put right here. And then we've got our two 4 AWG by 5/16 lugs. So we'll put that on the other end. Then we'll put heat shrink over the end of these. And then we will also put some loom over this stuff as well. So yeah, that's basically it. We got this cable off Amazon. It's pure copper. I think it was like basically $9 for 10 feet. Basically a little less than $1 a foot. So not too bad. And so what we need to make, you guys can see these are off Sean's website. We need to make a red 40-inch and then a black 31-inch. So power ground. So 40, 31, 71 inches we need of the 10 feet. And that's pretty much going to be about it. You guys have seen this tool on the channel before. This is just a battery cable crimper, lug terminal, whatever you want to call it. We'll actually use this on the red and black plugs as well. So I just happen to have this, and kind of like I said in the earlier part of the video, since I had that tool, I'm not going to pay Sean $150 to make these, because like I said, all I needed to order in this whole thing was more battery cable, and it was $10. So $10 versus $150. Yeah, you guys can see why we're going to go ahead and do this ourselves. So, all right, you can see we stripped the terminal, and basically I measured the inside diameter and length of this terminal. That way the copper goes all the way to the top of it. So we should get a good connection. Also, don't forget to put the back sleeve of this on. All right, so we have the battery cable basically in position on the vise just to hold it. We're going to put our crimper on here. make sure you tighten it down to the on position. And we're basically just going to start crimping this until it actually makes contact. So as you just saw that lift up, be careful when you finally do get it tight. You do want to make sure that it is, you know, pushed all the way down. So yeah, that's pretty much going to be about it. I want to go ahead and make sure this is all the way down. All right, that's fully tight. All right, cool. That looks like it tightened all the way down. We got an even crimp all the way around it. Basically gonna slide in the back sleeve over this, and then, you know, we're gonna push that all the way up. Push that all the way up to the terminal. Then we're basically gonna tighten this thing down. So there you go. That is one of the two terminals. So that is the positive and negative terminal for the ECU end. For the other end, we need to strip these, put on the traditional copper terminal, then kind of like we said, we're going to loom it, put a heat shrink tubing on it, all that good stuff. So all right, so I have finished the power cable. This will basically go up to the fuse box, as we've talked about before. Finish it off with some heat shrink tubing, some wire loom, and that's about it. So let's go ahead, do the ground. It'll be the same process as this one, and we should be ready to power up the ECU from battery power. All right, guys, that's gonna be a wrap on the battery cables. You guys can see we have them both plugged in. Obviously, they are not routed the right way. These will go to the left, down, under the fender, and up and over. The ground is down here in front of the dry sump mount. The positive cable will go here on the fuse box. So that's pretty much it. And kind of like I said, I had everything. The only thing I didn't have was the cable itself. So I've got $9 in this whole swap versus the $150. And that took me maybe an hour. It wasn't that long. I do have one other update, and what that is I have successfully gotten the ECU kind of set up in the car. We are connected to it. You guys can see that green light right there. That is indicating ECU is in low power mode, and it will basically allow you to kind of write to it. The only thing we've really done in here is basically updated the map sensor to the LS3 Gen 4 3 bar. The part number is going to end in 2525. That is the LS9 sensor. That's what I have on the blower. The other thing that I did was we went to the intake air temp sensor. So click that button. There's a little down arrow. And right here you guys can see this table. We updated this data with the information from Doller Motorsports. Now, unfortunately, Ballinger gives you all of the information in Celsius, and the Haltech reads it in Fahrenheit. So I don't know if there's a way to convert that. Basically, all I had to do was I had Google open, I had Ballinger open, and I just kind of had to, you know, match everything. So if the temperature was 10 degrees Celsius, type that in on Google from Celsius to Fahrenheit, went to their chart, grabbed that little piece of information, and I typed that in here. So that is all in here, and you guys can see all of these values right here. So I've entered all of those based off of what Doller Motorsports provided, and a little bit of help of Google translating Celsius to Fahrenheit. So yeah, the last update I had for right now was all of the updates for the sensors, inputs, and outputs, and everything that we're gonna be running. So 2 fuel pump outputs. For the sensors, we've got the flex fuel sensor, the fuel pressure sensor, engine coolant pressure sensor, and engine coolant temp. I don't know if we're going to use that from that low Doller Motorsports sensor. And the reason we have an update is because I reached out to Sean. I was kind of asking what seemed like stupid questions. I'm like, hey, you know, how are we going to go ahead and add all these sensors? Because if you guys look, I unplugged both of the harnesses. We only have an open port here, and we've got 1, 2, 3 ports open there. So we don't have a lot of open things. Well, I scheduled a Zoom call with Sean, and we basically realized that I don't have the documentation for this green harness from Boomslang. Basically what Sean is going to do, he's going to provide me the input and output harness diagram that was supposed to come with that harness. It wasn't in the bag. I opened it, double checked, and it wasn't there. So he's going to send me that. He's going to mark it up, what we need to cut, what we need to unpin, and that should be about it. Because basically what we're going to be doing is all of these plugs, these green plugs, not all of them are used. Apparently they were just put in to connect a connector from Chevrolet to the Haltech. Kind of weird that there's pins that kind of go nowhere. So I think we're going to utilize a few of those to wire up the fuel pumps as well as all of the sensors that we talked about. So the other thing is the fuel pressure sensor specific. They want the 5 volt as well as the ground to come from the ECU. So that was one thing they were very specific about, and that was Haltech in their instructions. Flex fuel sensor, we already have our power and ground for that. All we need is run an input to the ECU for that. And the coolant temp sensor, kind of like the fuel pressure sensor. I think it's just the way all those pressure sensors are. I think Haltech wants you to run the power and ground also from the Haltech. So maybe we can use, you know, a common 5 volt for both of those and a common ground for both of those, and we'll go from there. So, all right, guys, it's been probably 5 days since we last picked up the camera and provided you guys an update. Basically, long story short, you know, we met with Sean, we did the battery cables, and that's pretty much the last update. What we have here is actually the replacement 3D printed bracket. So go ahead, get this opened up. And also he sent the O2 sensor, basically the other secondary O2 sensor. So that should be in here. The one thing I still don't have an update on is actually going to be the wiring harness diagram. A buddy of mine has his, but I think his harness might be a different version than mine. So I need to confirm that. But yeah, so we still don't have a wiring diagram. And the other thing is Sean did publish a video on how to install this ECU and everything. And really nothing super crazy there. Really the only big difference that I saw was when we route these battery cables, route them through the top right here. So go over the mount and through and then into the engine bay. That was pretty much the gist of it. Everything else I pretty much had figured out. So, all right, this bracket showed up. Looks like everything is good to go. Did have better protective wrapping on it this time. It was fully encased with bubble wrap, and there was some paper in there as well. So yeah, that is the bracket, and then we got the secondary O2 sensor, and yeah, nothing really crazy here, just Bosch sensor, your weld-in bracket, and the harness for it that I think should go to the Haltech plug at the end of that. So, all right, guys, we got the new mount installed. You guys can see the ECU is back on it. We got the battery cables ran as how Sean suggested in his video. We now have the CAN box translator installed from Minton Performance. That was not installed, and we have that plugged in, and yeah, we're pretty much good to go. And basically these last 2 plugs down here, these Deutsch connectors, those will both be going to the wideband O2 sensors, one for the passenger, one for the driver's side. While we could go ahead and install that, but as you guys can see, we still have no engine in the car, and yeah, there's not really any point to go ahead and install those extra wires. So, all right, guys, we finally got our wiring diagrams from Sean, and you guys can see this is the Boomslang Haltech to the GM E38 ECU. That's what this Haltech it would be replacing. It's for Corvette Camaro G8 standalone. This is version 3.2. And just going through the sheet, you know, I was able to kind of break it down by connector. So connector A is going to be the 4-point for the 25 amp outputs. Connector C is going to be the one that's plugged in. And then connector E is this last one right here that's not plugged in. And yeah, so basically Sean was, you know, giving me information that, you know, we're going to go ahead and trim some of these wires. We're going to splice into them or altogether remove them from the Boomslang harness because the way the Haltech works. It doesn't use all the factory stuff. And so that was a good wiring diagram of the green lines, which basically have no, you know, information on them at all. And where it's connecting from the Chevrolet harness down here to the Haltech ECU. Continuing the conversation with Sean, he basically gave me the information we're gonna need. So we're gonna do a flex fuel sensor, the map sensor. That is going to be the one that's actually in the bottom here. So we're gonna have to run a line and vacuum line for that. So that's for the map sensor built into the Haltech. Fuel pressure sensor, coolant pressure sensor, and then our external pumps. So based on that information, I've actually already started laying out our harness, and you guys will see that here. And the way the Haltech works, you're actually gonna share power and ground for the two pressure sensors. So the fuel pressure and the coolant, well, you guys can see I have a blue line here and a black line. Blue is gonna be the power, black is gonna be ground. Then we have it teeing off into here. This will be going down to the coolant pressure sensor here on the passenger side head. Then you can follow the rest of the blue wire down, and that'll be going over to our fuel pressure regulator. And then you'll see the yellow wire, that is gonna be the signal, basically telling you how much pressure is coming back. That yellow wire will run through the harness back here and into the ECU. And then you guys will see I chose a green harness for the coolant temp sensor. That is going to be the wiring for the two pressure sensors. And then for the wires going to the ECU itself, you know, for the fuel pressure, we're going to use pin C10. For the coolant pressure, we're going to use pin C20. And then our power is going to be the same. So C25, C25. Ground is going to be the same, C26, C26. So that is going to be the two pressure sensors. Map sensor, like I said, that's just a vacuum line. And then the flex fuel sensor, since I already had it wired in the car and we're going to power it the same way we had it powered before using the DSX kit. So I've actually already included that in a harness. So you guys can see the adapter there that plugs into the coil pack. And then you guys can see this harness run up here. That will be going to this white wire. And this white wire is what's going to go down to the ECU. So we're just going to reuse the same sensor signal wire that we had to the E40 ECU. So that will be the power, ground, and signal for the flex fuel sensor. Fuel, coolant, we talked about that. Now, external pumps. You'll notice I have no red wiring here. That's because I have placed an order for it, but we just got 10 inches of snow. So I don't have any 12 gauge wire. And that will eventually come down to here. Basically, that'll connect to these thicker wires here. And that will be the 25 amp output. And that will go to, I think it's HCO 1 and 4. So yeah, pump 1 will go to the high output number 4. Then pump 2 will be high output number 1. Now let's travel back in time a couple years ago. And what we did, I installed a hot wire kit on this car years ago. And you guys will see we have that's from Racetronics. Well, I deleted the relay a couple years ago because we utilized this MSD relay that's sitting over there on the driver's side under the fender. Well, you know, in hindsight, that wasn't really a great idea because if that relay died, I got to pull the car apart, pull the wheel off, pull the fender off, and it wasn't really accessible. And now that we're going to be eliminating the Hob switch, that MSD relay, I kind of need to go back in time and put this back in. So we're going to put this relay back where it goes in the driver's side rear fender. We're going to delete the vacuum block as well as the MSD relay under the fender, and we'll have a simplified system. The only thing we're going to have to do, I just found the feed line for this relay. Well, with the LS9 setup, that alternator's on the passenger side. So we'll have to extend that wire, redo the crimp, whatever we got to do. And yeah, so we're kind of going back to stock-ish. We'll be eliminating that MSD relay, putting this relay back in from Racetronics. Also, I just ordered a new fuel pressure sensor. Nothing against the fuel pressure sensor I have in the car. It's from Aeroforce. You guys can see it actually on the end of the fuel pressure regulator sticking out. I've decided to go ahead and replace that just because while we're starting over new, with new motor, new ECU, I didn't want to reuse an old sensor. So we're going to go ahead and upgrade the Aeroforce fuel pressure sensor with one from Doller Motorsports. I was pretty happy with the quality of the one that we got for the coolant pressure, so I just decided to go ahead and order another one of those. All right, guys, our pressure sensor has come in from Doller Motorsports. And the reason we're doing that is simply just due to the fact we have the car apart. It's real simple for me to get access to it right now. It's right here. You guys can see the harness. And the other thing is I'm actually pulling that harness out and that sensor. We might use that in a future project. I'm just not sure. It's a 1/8 inch NPT. It's 150 PSI. And it's the number that starts with 899. All right, so get this thing opened up. You got the sensor itself. We got the plug and everything for that. So yeah, since we won't be using the Aeroforce kit and we're pretty much removing that entire thing from the car, you guys will understand that in a future video. So we have to pull that stuff out, and the wire harness that was connected to this is not going to be used like we said. So that's why we need that plug. And I saw that the sensor actually came with it. I was like, okay, cool. And so all that we really have to do now is wire in the 3 wires from this into the 3 wires that we ran over here. And I think what we said was blue is gonna be power, black is gonna be ground, and yellow is gonna be the signal back to the ECU. So, all right, so to remove the old sensor, we're just gonna use our crescent wrench here, loosen that up, pop that off. We will put some rags underneath here because I'm sure there's a little bit of fuel in there. Once we're ready, we'll take our new sensor, we'll put a little bit of Loctite 565 thread sealant on there, put that on the end, screw this in there, and it should be as simple as that, just replacing it and swapping it out. All right, guys, I just finished up the new fuel pressure sensor install. Pretty much like we said, you just use a crescent wrench, bust the old one off, put a little bit of thread sealant on there, put the new one in, tighten it down, you're good to go. I have one concern. The 90-degree fitting that comes off here was very tight to the old sensor. I think the low dollar sensor might be even a little bit longer. So we may have to reposition this 90-degree elbow here, either straight up or straight down, or maybe like turn it to an angle. That way the fuel line that goes right here doesn't hit the electrical connector going into the low dollar motorsport sensor. I was gonna be working outside for a separate project, but it is starting to rain and I think it's supposed to blow over in like the next 30 minutes. But in the meantime, a big order of ours came in from Amazon, and you'll see we have some non-insulated butt connectors. We're gonna use that to basically connect our wires together that we need to on the sensor harness. And then also you will see this Hystrionica. I have no idea what nationality that brand is out of, but we ordered this, and this is going to be a set of wire strippers as well as butt connector crimpers. And the reason I picked up this tool set was because I've been using butt connectors for years, but I've always been doing it wrong. And I'll be honest, I've been using my weather pack crimpers to crush the butt connector, and I know that's wrong. It's worked. I've never had an issue with it. But, you know, it's time to step up our game a little bit, buy some proper tools. And this set actually has a bunch of different die sets that you're going to want to use. And this will help us make sure that the sensor harness is even better. So, and you basically just line up the jaw set with the one you're going to want. So, and if you look very carefully, it says H4. So that's going to be this one. Yeah, that lines up. So, yeah, so let's go ahead and get our harness kind of ready for our connectors. All right, so I got the jaw set swapped out. This was the H4, kind of like I said. And these are ratcheting. And yeah, that's pretty much should be about it. So, all right, so we got our wire that we want to strip. We're going to go ahead, stick it inside of our stripping tool, line it up to the edge, grab it, and strip it. Simple as that. So you put it to the edge, press the trigger, and it pulls and strips it. So cool. That is a demonstration of our first strip. For the butt connector, I grabbed our 22-18 because I know that this is 18 gauge wire. Put the butt connector on there. We will grab our tool. All right, so for the smallest one, I'm going to use the smallest crimper connection on here, and we'll go ahead and ratchet that tight. All right, well, it's not exactly centered where I wanted it, but it'll do. All right, you can see the second joint, I put it right in the middle of the back half of the connector, and that's right exactly where I wanted it. So this white wire that you guys can see, this is our E85 sensor. We've got a couple more connections we need to make. This will eventually all get heat shrink tubed, but right now I'm still kind of mocking up the wires, and until we get to that, I'm just going to leave them bare, but we will wrap these in heat shrink tube that has the glue inside of it. So just want to make you aware of that. All right, guys, we got the sensor harness all as one branch now, and then the piece that we had going off to the coolant sensor on the passenger side, that's all been tied in. Those wires are now all one wire. And you'll see right here we have some 12 AWG 12 gauge wire, and that is going to be for our fuel pumps. And we basically need to run 2 looms of that through here, one for fuel pump 1 and the second one for obviously fuel pump 2. And then the other side of this equation is on the alternator, we're going to have to create a new power line for the hot wire kit that we got from Racetronics. You'll remember that I talked about that earlier where that was on the driver's side. Well, now we need to extend that wire to run from the passenger side back. Probably put it into that harness as well and then run that through the driver's side fender liner going to the back to the fuel pump. So that's yet another wire that we're going to have to add to this bundle. That keeps kind of growing down here. As far as sensor updates, the map sensor that's built into the Haltech, that's what Sean wants us to use. I picked up a 3/16 spool of silicone vacuum hose. We're gonna run that to our connector down here on the bottom of the Haltech ECM, so we'll run that to that end. And we will run that to our adapter on the side of the LS9 blower. You guys can see this adapter here. We've swapped out the map sensor for the LS9 map sensor. And then on the back here, you will see this 1/8" NPT by a 3/16 hose barb. And that will basically be our map sensor going directly to the ECU from the supercharger. All right, guys, we have talked about this part for a few weeks now, but what we'll be doing today is actually deleting all of this right here. So we have a vacuum block from Vibrant Performance. I've got our MSD solid state relay with a big, battery cable coming directly from the alternator. We've got both of our fuel pumps, the outputs going to the fuel pump. So that's your 2 electrical feeds. And then up here is what triggers those 2 fuel pumps. So we had an intake line coming from the supercharger, fed the vacuum block. When a certain PSI was met, it would ground out and then send a signal down here through the wire harness to the ground side of the MSD relay. You guys can see the blue wire there. Same thing for the other Hobbs switch. Activates at a certain PSI, sends a ground signal down through here to the other relay. And then those trigger the positive power cable going to the fuel pump down here at the bottom. So it was a fairly simple setup. Hobbs switches, vacuum block. When they ground out, they activate the trigger on the MSD relay, and then they send power to the fuel pumps. Well, now that we've got a Haltech ECU that basically has a PDU built into it, we can eliminate all of this right here and send the power directly from the ECU over on the passenger side down here to the driver's side. Then that'll go back and activate the fuel pump. So we're going to take advantage of our quite expensive ECU setup, eliminate all of this setup, and go from there. Now, I will say this, with a stock ECU and with an external fuel pump, this setup worked fine. The only issue I've had in just about 10 years of having a supercharger on this car, I did have a cheap Hobbs switch fail because I basically did what was called an ECS East Coast Superchargers Stage 1 external fuel pump. I had that fail, and actually it failed on the dyno. So Alvin at PCM, when he was tuning the car, they just plugged the Hobbs switch in to run full time, and obviously that's gonna kill your external fuel pump faster. And after that failed on the dyno, I was like, all right, it's time to get rid of the DIY kit, because I only had a few $100 into it, and buy a fuel pump kit from A&A Superchargers. And you guys can see that's basically what they did. Now, A&A does not have the vacuum block. A&A does not have the MSD relay. I tried to make this as bulletproof as possible. The one thing that we used from A&A were the Hobbs switches, the wiring, and some of the weather pack or Metro pack connectors, whatever you want to call it. So, I mean, it worked just fine. Worked on a dyno. It made 800 wheel on 93. We're good to go there. But, like I said, we have this expensive ECU. Let's take advantage of it and eliminate any single point of failure on here, which could have been Hobbs switch, which could have been the MSD relay. Now, in the 3 to 5 years we've had this setup, I never had an issue with that relay, but I was reading up on it. If that thing gets wet, it can short circuit. And we don't have the best accessibility to it. if that thing had failed at the Indy half mile, I would have to take the fender off the car. And doing that in a windy parking lot at an airport, yeah, that's not exactly the best place to be doing that. So what we're gonna do is basically delete the hop switch, delete the MSD relay, and basically continue those power wires that are over here, go through the engine bay and down, and we'll have them run directly to the ECU. Now, we do have one other thing that we're gonna have to modify that we pointed out earlier. You guys can see the Racetronics relay on the other fender. I have that coming in through here. There's a red trigger wire up here, and then we've got a red power wire coming out, going down and into this wire right here. So we will basically restore that Racetronics relay by extending this power wire from going down here. We'll run it through here, and then we'll have it come out to the passenger side where the alternator will be. And another reason why we have to be under here, because our catch can setup from Extreme CFM, you see there's a plug on the dry sump port. We need to unplug that. I need to put an AN fitting there and then run some rubber hose over to the dry sump tank that we have over in the passenger corner now. And after we do this, we should eliminate ever having to come under here again, except maybe draining out the catch can. But yeah, you can do that from under the car. So, all right guys, I have finished removing the thick battery cable, the MSD relay, as well as the hob switches. That stuff actually weighs quite a lot, more the battery cable than anything else. And that's probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 pounds of stuff. And then you will also notice we are pretty much done with the mock-up of the fuel pump and the sensors harness. So these are all the wires that we're running down to the ECU. We've got our 2 red thick, that's for the fuel pumps, white is for the E85 fuel sensor. Green and yellow, that's coolant and fuel. Those will be for the sensor outputs. And then the black and the blue, that is going to be the shared power, shared ground for our sensors for the coolant temp, as well as the fuel pressure sensor. You guys can see we have our branch here for the coolant temp sensor. You guys can see over there the yellow, blue, and the black. That is the branch for the fuel pressure sensor there in the corner. And then this separate 12 gauge thick wire that is going to be the feed for the hot wire kit from Racetronics. Remember, we're swapping in the relay to the back. So yeah, I think that's pretty much gonna be it for this video. You guys really don't need to see me loom all this stuff, put heat shrink tubing on it, tie it into the boom slang harness down here. I mean, we've already gone over what wire needs to go to what pin on the 3 harnesses that plug into the Haltech from the stock computer. And like I said, we've already done that. Now, I will say this. If you guys are not having Sean tune your car, make sure you guys go over what input's going to what selection, because your tuner will need to know what is coming in and out on the inputs and outputs on your Haltech. And other than that, I am actually out of my heat shrink tubing that has glue in it. I have some cheap crap, but with the wiring, the amount of stuff that we have going on under here, I don't want to use anything piss poor. So I'm going to wait, order some new stuff, and we can get that done off screen. The other thing is, do you want to show you over here on the driver's side? I did want to show you we have nothing under here besides wiring. And this wire right here, you guys can see that hot wire trigger. I basically just need to pull that back through the body, and we'll run that to the relay up there in the back of the driver's rear corner. And so yeah, I think that is going to be about it for the wiring job. If we have any major updates or anything we need to change, we'll let you guys know in a future video. But for the Haltech wiring, pretty simple, not all that complicated. The ECU just plugs and play. Use the jumper harness from Boom Slang, and then if you guys have any aftermarket stuff you're doing, like fuel systems, sensors, any of that, get with your tuner, get with Sean, whoever is going to do your car. And like I said, make sure you just have those inputs and outputs correct on ECU. So yeah, that's gonna be it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, hit that like button. If you want to follow along with the rest of this build, we obviously need to get the motor started. We need to get the rest of the car fixed up. Hit that subscribe button, turn on your bell notifications. If you guys want to help support the channel, check out all the links down below. I'll try to drop you links for everything that we use, the tools, the wiring, the heat shrink tubing, the loom. I got almost all of that on Amazon. We'll drop links for that. And also make sure you check out our website, BonecrrusherSS.com. We have a ton of used C6 parts. Obviously, we're kind of taking stuff off by the day. So that'll all be on our website. We got merch, stickers, t-shirts, sweatshirts, all that stuff, and that's going to be it. Thanks, guys. Have a great one.